The city never slept. Neon lights painted the night in colors too bright for comfort, blue signs flashing over tall glass towers, red arrows pointing down at crowded markets, green letters glowing above smoky food stalls. The air was filled with the hum of hovercars and the chatter of voices in many different languages. Humans were only a small part of the city, but Myra had learned to walk through it with quiet confidence. She worked as a translator, guiding traders from one species to another, helping them find the right words to trade, argue, or laugh together. Most days were the same: long hours, fast deals, and streets packed so tightly that she could barely breathe. But the city was alive, and in some strange way, it comforted her. Tonight, however, the alleys felt different. The main road had been closed for repairs, so Myra decided to take the narrow side path that wound behind the markets. The alley was filled with flickering lights, half-broken signs, and walls sprayed with symbols from gangs she didn't recognize. She kept her steps quick, her eyes sharp, and her mind focused on getting home. Then she heard footsteps running fast, louder than the hum of neon signs. Myra froze and pressed herself against the wall. The sound grew closer, mixed with rough voices calling out in a harsh language she did not understand. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a figure in a long cloak rushing toward her. The figure stumbled, almost falling, before pulling itself up again. The stranger looked back, fear written in every movement. Myra could see now that several tall, shadowy pursuers were not far behind. The cloaked figure darted into a smaller side alley, only to find it blocked by a locked gate. The pursuers shouted. The stranger turned, and for one brief moment, his hood slipped back. Myra saw his face. His skin shimmered faintly under the neon lights, smooth like glass with soft lines of silver across it. His eyes glowed a pale green, sharp yet strangely gentle. He was not human. The group chasing him was closing in fast. Myra's first thought was to step back, stay out of it, and let the city's hidden rules play out. But something inside her stopped her feet. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, fear mixed with hope, or maybe it was simply human instinct, the kind that told her she couldn't watch someone suffer without trying to help. "Here," she whispered sharply, waving him toward her. The stranger hesitated, then rushed to her side. Myra quickly pulled him toward a gap between two shops where the neon signs buzzed so loudly they covered the sound of movement. She pushed him behind a stack of old crates and placed a finger to her lips. The pursuers ran past, their heavy boots shaking the ground. One of them stopped for a moment, sniffing the air, before being pulled along by the others. Slowly, the alley grew quiet again, leaving only the hum of the neon and Myra's fast heartbeat. For a moment, neither spoke. The stranger caught his breath, his green eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Finally, he lowered his hood and looked at her directly. "You helped me," he said in a low voice, his words marked by a strange accent but still clear. Myra shrugged, trying to hide the nerves buzzing in her chest. "Looked like you needed it." He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to understand why she had done it. "Most would have walked away," he said softly. "Well," Myra replied, meeting his gaze, "I'm not most." The stranger gave a small, almost tired smile. He looked around cautiously, then back at her. "My name is Kale." Myra nodded. She wasn't sure what kind of danger she had just stepped into, but she knew one thing: the City of Lights had many secrets, and tonight she had just discovered one of them. As they stood in the glow of flickering neon, she realized that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. Myra walked quickly through the narrow alley, Kale following close behind. The neon lights reflected off the wet ground, making it look like they were walking on liquid color. She didn't usually bring strangers near her home, but something told her that leaving him behind would be worse. "You can stay at my place for a little while," she said without looking back. "But only until it's safe." Cale nodded silently. He moved with care, his long cloak hiding most of his figure. Still, Myra could see the strange way his skin glowed faintly when the neon lights touched it. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. They climbed up a set of narrow metal stairs that rattled with every step. Myra unlocked the door to her small apartment above a busy noodle shop. The smell of broth and spice floated through the floorboards, mixing with the faint hum of neon signs outside her window. Her apartment was simple: one narrow bed, a small table with 2 chairs, and shelves stacked with old paper books that no one else cared about anymore. Myra turned on a soft lamp, pushing away the shadows. "Sit," she told him, pointing at the chair. "You look like you've been running for days." Cale sat carefully, his eyes scanning the room. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he finally pulled back his hood fully. His face was smooth and pale, lined with silver markings that looked almost like flowing rivers. His hair was dark, with a faint blue shimmer when the light hit it. Myra studied him openly now. "You're not from here," she said quietly. "No," Cale answered. His voice was calm, but there was heaviness in it. "I came to this city to study. To learn. But I saw something I should not have, and now, they hunt me." Myra frowned. "Who are they?" Cale lowered his eyes. "The Syndicate. They control much of the city's shadows. I discovered records they wanted hidden. Knowledge about the way they rise to power, the secrets of their control. If I speak, they lose everything." Myra leaned back in her chair. The Syndicate was a name everyone whispered but no one dared to challenge. They were powerful, dangerous, and always watching. Helping Cale was no small risk. "You should leave the city," she said. Cale shook his head slowly. "I cannot. If I leave, the truth disappears. And the truth must remain." His glowing eyes lifted to hers. "But I cannot do it alone." Myra looked away, staring at the neon glow outside the window. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. She was just a translator, not a fighter or a hero. Yet, deep down, she knew she couldn't walk away now. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why trust a stranger?" Cale's gaze lingered on her. "Because you did not walk away in the alley. Because in your eyes, I saw something I do not often see among others in the city. You saw me as more than a burden. You saw me as worth saving." Myra's chest tightened at his words. No one had ever said something like that to her before. She forced herself to look down at the table, tapping her fingers nervously. "You're giving me too much credit," she muttered. "I just didn't want blood on my shoes." Cale gave a small smile, though it carried a sadness with it. "Maybe. But sometimes, even the smallest act carries more meaning than we know." The room grew quiet. Outside, the city roared with life: hovercars rushing past, neon lights flickering, voices rising from the streets below. But inside Myra's small apartment, time seemed to slow. Finally, Myra stood and walked toward the shelf. She pulled out a blanket and tossed it to him. "You can sleep here tonight. Don't touch anything. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do." Cale caught the blanket with careful hands. "Thank you, Myra." Her name in his voice sounded different, softer, almost respectful. She paused at the doorway to her small bedroom, suddenly unsure of what she had just invited into her life. As she lay on her bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, her thoughts spun. Who was Cale really? Could she trust him? Or had she just stepped into a danger she couldn't escape? Yet, beneath all her doubts, one truth echoed clearly in her heart: something about him felt different. Not just alien, but important. And in the glowing city that never slept, Myra realized that her quiet life was no longer hers alone. Morning came slowly to the city. The neon lights never truly faded, but the sky above turned from deep black to a gray-blue haze. Myra woke up to the sound of voices from the noodle shop downstairs and the faint hum of delivery drones outside her window. For a moment, she thought last night had been a dream. But when she stepped into the small living space, she saw Cale sitting quietly at the table. His cloak was folded neatly over the chair, and he was reading one of her old books with careful hands. "You read?" she asked, surprised. Cale looked up, his green eyes glowing softly. "Not all of your language," he admitted, "but enough to understand pieces. Humans write differently than most. You put feelings into words, not just facts." Myra raised an eyebrow. "And what's wrong with that?" "Nothing," Cale said. "It is beautiful. Your kind writes as though every word has a heartbeat." Myra blinked at him. No one had ever described books like that before, not even her friends back home on Earth. She poured herself a cup of instant coffee and tried to ignore the strange warmth in her chest. "Don't get too comfortable," she warned. "You still need to stay hidden. The syndicate doesn't give up easily." Cale nodded. "I know. But last night, I had peace for the first time in many days. For that, I thank you." His voice was calm, but Myra could hear the weight behind it. She studied him again: his silver-marked skin, his steady posture, the way he seemed both fragile and strong at once. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. The day passed quietly. Myra went about her routine, working on her translation device while Cale stayed inside. He asked questions about Earth, about her childhood, and about human life. Myra told him simple things: how children used to chase each other through green fields, how families gathered for meals, how humans often laughed even when times were hard. Cale listened with full attention, his eyes softening as she spoke. "Your people carry light in your stories," he said. "Even in darkness, you remember joy. That is rare." Myra gave a small laugh. "We're stubborn, that's all. We don't like giving up." In the evening, she decided to show him the rooftop above her building. They climbed the old ladder and stepped out into the cool night air. From there, the city stretched endlessly, towers rising into the sky, lights glowing in every color, streams of air traffic rushing past like glowing rivers. Cale stood quietly, taking it all in. "It is loud," he said at last. "But it is alive." Myra leaned against the railing, watching him. "You don't have places like this where you're from." He shook his head. "My world is quiet. Too quiet, perhaps. Knowledge is our strength, but sometimes, we forget to live." He looked at her. "Humans do not forget." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Myra felt the world around them fade. The noise of the city, the endless lights, all of it seemed distant compared to the strange connection forming between them. She broke the silence with a small smile. "Careful. You almost sound like you admire us." Cale's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Perhaps I do." The moment passed, but it left Myra's heart unsteady. She had never expected to care about an alien fugitive, yet here she was, standing under the neon sky, sharing something that felt far more human than she could explain. As they returned downstairs, Cale suddenly grew serious. "Myra," he said softly, "you should not risk yourself for me. If the syndicate finds us, you will suffer because of me." Myra stopped at the bottom of the ladder and turned to face him. "Listen, Cale. I've lived in this city long enough to know danger doesn't wait for permission. We all take risks every day. At least this one feels like it matters." Cale's gaze softened, but he said nothing more. Later, when Myra lay awake in her small bed, she couldn't stop thinking about his words, his smile, and the way he listened so carefully to her stories. She told herself it was foolish he was not human, and their lives were too different. But deep down, something told her this bond was only beginning to grow. And in a city full of neon lights and endless secrets, that bond might be the one thing that could not be broken. The city never stayed quiet for long. By the next evening, Myra noticed unusual movement in the streets below her apartment. Groups of tall figures in black coats were scattered through the market, their eyes scanning every corner. Their movements were sharp, precise, too organized to be simple traders. Myra knew immediately who they were. The syndicate was hunting again. From her window, she saw one of them hold a small glowing device, checking the air for traces. Her chest tightened. They weren't just looking, they were tracking. She turned quickly. Cale was at the table, his cloak pulled close around him. He looked calm, but Myra could see the tension in his eyes. "They're outside," she whispered. "Looking for you." Cale rose slowly, his expression serious. "Then we must move. Staying here will put you in danger." Myra shook her head. "If you run without a plan, they'll catch you in minutes. The alleys are filled with their people. We need to outsmart them." For a moment, Cale studied her as though weighing her courage. Finally, he nodded. "Then show me the human way of surviving." Myra grabbed her old travel bag and stuffed in a few essentials: water, a small data pad, and one of her worn books. She motioned for Cale to follow, and together they slipped out the back door of the noodle shop. The alley was narrow and smelled of smoke, but it was quieter than the streets. Myra led him through a twisting path she knew well. She had grown up in these alleys, and while others saw only chaos, she knew their hidden turns. But even with her knowledge, she could feel the pressure closing in. Every corner seemed to hold shadows, every noise made her jump. Cale walked silently, his steps light, his glowing eyes scanning their surroundings. At one point, they passed a broken neon sign buzzing loudly. Myra slowed, pressing herself against the wall as two syndicate hunters walked by. She held her breath, and Cale stood completely still beside her. The hunters glanced around, their eyes sharp, before moving on. Only when they were gone did Myra let out a shaky breath. "You are very skilled," Cale whispered. "Not skilled," she replied. "Just desperate." They moved deeper into the alleyways until they reached a hidden stairwell leading to an abandoned storage room. Myra pushed open the rusted door, and they stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old metal. "This should give us a little time," Myra said, dropping her bag on the floor. Cale sat down, his cloak folding around him like a shield. "You risk much for me, Myra." She sat across from him, tired but firm. "I told you before. If I wanted a quiet life, I would have stayed far from the city. But I didn't. Maybe I was waiting for something, or someone." Cale tilted his head, his eyes studying her with that steady calm she had come to know. "Humans are strange," he said softly. "You stand in the face of fear, yet you speak of hope." Myra gave a small smile. "We don't know how to stop hoping. Even when everything tells us not to." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, the city roared with life, but inside the small room, they shared a quiet moment. Myra noticed the way Cale's hands rested carefully, as though he carried more weight than he showed. She wondered what kind of life he had before the chase, and how much he had lost. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed from the alley outside, the heavy footsteps of more hunters. Myra's heart jumped. She moved quickly to the window, peeking through the cracks. A group of syndicate enforcers were sweeping the area, their voices sharp. "They're getting closer," she whispered. Cale rose to his feet, his eyes glowing brighter in the dim room. "Then we must be ready." Myra tightened her grip on the strap of her bag. She had never been a fighter, never been someone who sought danger. But standing beside Cale, she felt something different. She wasn't just running anymore, she was choosing to stand, even if the risk was great. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the alley. Myra turned to Cale. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she realized just how much she had already tied her fate to his. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The storage room felt smaller as the footsteps outside faded away. Myra leaned against the wall, her heart still beating fast. The danger was not gone, only delayed. She turned to Cale, who stood with his head bowed, as if he was carrying more than fear. "Cale," she said quietly, "you've been hiding since the night I found you. But if I'm going to help you, I need to know the truth. What are they chasing you for? What are you carrying?" For a long time, Cale did not answer. His glowing eyes stayed on the floor, and Myra thought he would remain silent. But then he lifted his gaze, and there was something in it: weight, sorrow, and resolve. "I hold knowledge that could destroy the syndicate," he said. His voice was calm, but every word felt heavy. "Records of their secrets. Proof of how they control the city. Their lies, their hidden deals, their crimes. I gathered it while I studied their systems. I thought knowledge alone would protect me. But I was wrong." Myra frowned. "If you have that much, why not give it to the authorities?" Cale shook his head. "The syndicate reaches everywhere. Many officials already serve them. If I reveal this knowledge without care, it will disappear and I will disappear with it." He reached inside his cloak and pulled out a small cube. Its surface glowed faintly, silver lines pulsing like veins. "This holds everything. Names, deals, codes. Enough to tear apart their empire. But if they take it from me, all hope is lost." Myra stared at the cube. It was smaller than her palm, yet it carried the weight of an entire city. She felt her stomach twist. "So you've been running, carrying this the whole time?" Cale nodded. "Yes. And I cannot keep running forever." Myra's mind raced. She thought of her quiet life before Cale, long hours as a translator, simple routines, small dreams. Safe, but empty. Now here she was, hiding in a dusty room with an alien fugitive who carried a secret powerful enough to shake the city. She should have been terrified. She should have told him to leave and taken no part in this fight. But when she looked at him, she felt something else. He was calm, wise, and brave in ways that were different from humans. And yet, he trusted her, something no one else in the city had ever done. "You could still run," she said softly. Find another world, hide forever. Why stay? Kale's eyes glowed brighter. Because truth should not die in shadows. My people value knowledge, but I have learned something from yours. Knowledge without courage is nothing. And courage, he paused, studying her face. Courage is what humans carry most strongly. Myra felt her chest tighten at his words. He was right. Humans were stubborn, always holding on to hope even when it seemed foolish. She thought of her childhood stories, of people standing up for what mattered, even when the world was against them. She took a deep breath. Then we don't run. We fight. Kale's expression softened, almost surprised. You would risk yourself for this. For this, Myra said firmly, pointing at the cube, and for you. If you fall into their hands, none of it matters. But together, maybe we can find a way to make this count. Kale bowed his head slightly, almost like a gesture of respect. Then we stand as one. The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It was no longer filled with fear, it was filled with decision. Myra knew what she had chosen. Outside, the city buzzed with its endless neon glow. The syndicate still hunted, their shadows spreading across every alley. But inside the small room, Myra and Kale had made a choice. They would not run forever. They would fight not just to survive, but to change something greater. Myra looked at Kale and gave a small smile. So, scholar, do you have a plan? Kale's lips curved slightly. With your help, I will. For the first time, Myra felt that her stubborn hope was no longer foolish. It was the start of something real, something that might light a path even through the darkest alley. The night was alive with neon, painting every wall, puddle, and broken sign in electric colors. Myra and Kale moved silently through the maze of alleys, their shadows stretching long and thin under the flickering lights. Every corner they turned could hide danger. Every distant shout could be the syndicate closing in. Myra gripped her bag tightly, the small cube with Kale's secret safely inside. Her heart pounded, but her mind was focused. She knew these alleys better than anyone, every narrow turn, every hidden path. Kale followed her, trusting her instincts, his glowing eyes scanning for movement. There, Myra whispered, pointing to a stack of crates near a dead-end alley. We can set a trap here. Kale nodded, his hands moving with careful precision. Show me. Myra explained her plan. They would use the cluttered crates to block the syndicate's path, forcing them to come closer, into a narrow space where they could only move slowly. Then, using the city's own shadows and sounds, they could create confusion, slipping past unnoticed. Kale listened intently, absorbing every detail. Your people are clever, he said quietly. Your mind adapts to chaos. Myra gave a small grin. We have to survive. The first pursuers arrived shortly after. The heavy footsteps echoed, bouncing off the walls. Myra pressed herself against a side wall, signaling Kale to stay low. The syndicate enforcers moved cautiously, their glowing devices scanning every shadow. Myra held her breath as one came close to their hiding spot. With a flick of her hand, she nudged a crate slightly, making a soft scraping sound. The enforcer's attention shifted, just enough. Kale moved silently behind him, leading him into a narrow passage blocked by stacked crates. The enforcer stumbled, shouting for backup. Myra felt the thrill of adrenaline surge through her. It was dangerous, but it worked. One by one, the hunters were drawn into the traps, slowed down, or confused by the shifting shadows. Kale's voice came softly beside her. You are fearless. Myra shook her head. Not fearless. Careful. And stubborn. Together, they moved through the maze of alleys, slipping past the chaos they had created. The city's neon lights flickered above them, reflecting off wet walls like rivers of light. Myra could feel Kale's presence beside her, steady, calm, and protective in his own way. Suddenly, a group of enforcers blocked the alley ahead. Myra froze, her mind racing. Kale looked at her, his glowing eyes steady. We do this together, he whispered. Myra nodded. She stepped forward, raising her voice to call attention to the shadows above. Sparks from a broken neon sign flickered, drawing the enforcers' eyes upward. Kale moved silently behind them, leading them toward the dead-end crates once more. The confusion was enough to give them a path forward. Breathing hard, Myra and Kale finally reached the open street. They paused, looking back at the alley. The syndicate enforcers were frustrated, regrouping, but they hadn't realized Myra and Kale had escaped. Kale turned to her, a rare smile on his face. You are remarkable, Myra. Humans are different than I imagined. Brave in ways beyond knowledge. Myra felt a warmth in her chest at his words. And you, she said softly, are smarter than anyone I've ever met. But you trust too easily. Kale chuckled faintly. I trusted you because you are human. They stood together for a moment, catching their breath. Around them, the city pulsed with life, hovercars rushing past, distant music from street performers, neon signs blinking endlessly. But for a brief moment, the noise didn't matter. They had survived. Together. Myra realized something she hadn't expected. In the chaos and danger, she felt a connection deeper than fear or friendship. Kale was no longer just an alien fugitive, he was someone she cared for, someone she wanted to protect, no matter what. Kale broke the silence. We have more to do, he said, his tone serious again. But tonight, we have won a small battle. And in this city, every small victory counts. Myra nodded, feeling the weight of truth in his words. She knew the syndicate would not give up, and their journey was far from over. But for now, standing together in the neon-lit streets, they had proven something important. Humans and aliens, courage and knowledge, could face even the darkest alley and survive. And more than survival, she realized, sometimes it was in those moments of danger that the heart found what it truly sought. The city was quieter than usual the next morning, though the neon lights still glowed faintly through the mist. Myra stood on the rooftop of her apartment building, her eyes scanning the streets below. The syndicate's presence seemed thinner today, as if last night's clever escape had shaken them more than she realized. Kale joined her, carrying the small cube that held the secrets of the syndicate. He looked at the glowing city around them, a faint smile on his face. The streets are not safe, he said, though there was a calmness in his voice. But at least now, we have a moment to think, to plan. Myra nodded. We survived. That counts for something. Kale studied her, his glowing green eyes soft. Not just survived, Myra. You adapted, you led, you cared. Humans, you are remarkable. Myra felt a warmth she couldn't explain. You've changed too, she said quietly. I've seen you smile more than you did yesterday. And you're calmer, somehow. Kale chuckled faintly. Perhaps because I have learned that courage is not only in action, but in trust. And I trust you. They walked down the narrow stairs together, the city opening around them. Myra led Kale to a quiet street lined with small shops and cafes. The neon signs flickered, casting colorful reflections on puddles from the morning rain. It was beautiful in a way that was entirely human, and Kale paused to take it in. "You have a world worth protecting," he said softly. "Even amidst danger, it shines." Myra glanced at him. "That's what I was trying to show you. Humans don't give up easily. And sometimes, we find light in the darkest places like tonight, or last night, or the alley where I first met you." Kale smiled faintly. "And that is why I cannot leave. My knowledge, the cube, it is nothing without courage to guide it. And I have found that courage in you." Myra felt her heart tighten. She realized she didn't want him to leave either. Not now. Not ever. She wanted him here, by her side, not just as an ally, but as someone who mattered deeply to her. Kale's hand brushed hers briefly, almost unintentionally. It sent a strange warmth through her chest. She looked up at him, and in his eyes she saw the same truth-reflected connection, trust, and something more. Something neither fear nor danger could destroy. The city was slowly waking, hovercars gliding past, vendors opening stalls, and humans and aliens moving through the streets together. Yet in the midst of the bustle, Myra and Kale stood still, wrapped in the quiet of mutual understanding. "You saved me," Kale said quietly. "More than once." "And you saved me too," Myra replied. "From fear, from doubt, from thinking my life was only about surviving. You showed me it could be about more." Kale's hand found hers again, this time holding it firmly but gently. "Then let us face the city together," he said. "Whatever comes, we do it side by side." Myra smiled, feeling stronger than she had ever felt. "Side by side," she agreed. For the first time in days, the neon-lit city felt alive not because of its lights or noise, but because they had discovered a light within themselves. Humans and aliens, courage and knowledge, trust and love, they had found strength together. The syndicate would not vanish completely, but they were no longer alone. They had proven that even in the darkest alleys, even in the face of danger, humans could stand out, adapt, and thrive. They were not merely survivors, they were hope bringers. Kale looked at Myra, a soft smile playing on his lips. "We will write new stories," he said, "stories of courage, trust, and, perhaps even something more." Myra squeezed his hand, feeling the pulse of her own heartbeat echo in agreement. "Yes," she whispered. "Stories of us." And together, they stepped down into the streets of the city, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The neon lights above seemed brighter now, reflecting the promise of a new dawn, a new chapter, and a love that had begun in the shadows but would shine in every corner of the city.